To the Most High, mighty and magnificent Empress, renowned for piety, virtue, and all gracious government, Elizabeth, by the grace of God, Queen of England, France, and Ireland, and of Virginia, defender of the faith, etc. Her most humble servant, Edmund Spencer, doth in all humility dedicate, present, and consecrate these his labors, to live with the eternity of her fame. The first book of the Faerie Queene, containing the legend of the Knight of the Red Cross, or of holiness. Lo, I, the man whose muse whilome did mask, as time her taught in lowly shepherd's weeds, am now enforced a far unfitter task, for trumpets stern to change mine oaten reeds, and sing of knights and ladies' gentle deeds, whose praises, having slept in silence long, me all too mean the sacred muse areads, to blazon broad amongst her learned throng. Fierce wars and faithful loves shall moralize my song. Help then, O holy Virgin, chief of nine, thy weaker novice to perform thy will. Lay forth out of thine everlasting shrine the antique rolls which there lie hidden still, of fairy knights and fairest Tanaquil, whom that most noble Briton prince so long sought through the world and suffered so much ill, that I must rue his undeserved wrong. O help thou my weak wit, and sharpen my dull tongue. And thou most dreaded imp of highest Jove, fair Venus' son, that with thy cruel dart at that good knight so cunningly didst rove, that glorious fire it kindled in his heart, lay now thy deadly Hebon bow apart, and with thy mother mild come to mine aid. Come both, and with you bring triumphant mart, in love's and gentle jollities arrayed, after his murderous spoils and bloody rage allayed. And with them eke, O goddess heavenly bright, mirror of grace and majesty divine, great lady of the greatest isle, whose light, like Phoebus' lamp, throughout the world doth shine, shed thy fair beams into my feeble eyne, and raise my thoughts too humble and too vile to think of that true glorious type of thine, the argument of mine afflicted style, the which to hear vouchsafe, O dearest dread, awhile. Canto 1. The patron of true holiness foul error doth defeat, hypocrisy him to entrap, doth to his home entreat. A gentle knight was pricking on the plain, yet clad in mighty arms and silver shield, wherein old dints of deep wounds did remain, the cruel marks of many a bloody field, yet arms till that time did he never wield. His angry steed did chide his foaming bit, as much disdaining to the curb to yield. Full jolly knight he seemed, and fair did sit, as one for knightly jousts and fierce encounters fit. But on his breast a bloody cross he bore, the dear remembrance of his dying lord, for whose sweet sake that glorious badge he wore, and dead as living ever him adored. Upon his shield the like was also scored, for sovereign hope, which in his help he had. Right faithful true he was in deed and word, but of his cheer did seem too solemn sad, yet nothing did he dread, but ever was ye dread. Upon a great adventure he was bond, that greatest Gloriana to him gave, the greatest glorious Queen of Fairyland, to win him worship and her grace to have, which of all earthly things he most did crave, and ever as he rode his heart did earn, to prove his puissance in battle brave, upon his foe, and his new force to learn, upon his foe a dragon horrible and stern. A lovely lady rode him fair beside, upon a lowly ass, more white than snow, yet she much whiter, but the same did hide under a veil that wimpled was full low, and over all a black stole she did throw, as one that inly mourned, so was she sad, and heavy sat upon her paltry snow, seemed in heart some hidden care she had, and by her in a line a milk-white lamb she had. So pure and innocent as that same lamb she was in life and every virtuous lore, and by descent from royal lineage came, of ancient kings and queens, that had of yore their scepters stretched from east to western shore, and all the world in their subjection held, till that infernal fiend with foul vapor forwasted all their land and them expelled, whom to avenge she had this night from far compelled. Behind her far away a dwarf did lag, that lazy seemed in being everlast, or wearied with bearing of her bag of needments at his back. Thus as they passed, the day with clouds was suddenly overcast, and angry Jove an hideous storm of rain did pour into his leman's lap so fast, that every wight to shroud it did constrain, and this fair couple eke to shroud themselves were fain. Enforced to seek some covert nigh at hand, a shady grove not far away they spied, that promised aid the tempest to withstand, whose lofty trees, yclad with summer's pride, did spread so broad that heaven's light did hide, not pierceable with power of any star, and within were paths and alleys wide, with footing worn, and leading inward far. Fair harbour that them seems, so in they entered are. And forth they passed, with pleasure forward led, loving to hear the birds' sweet harmony, which therein shrouded from the tempest dread, seemed in their song to scorn the cruel sky. Much can they praise the trees so straight and high, the sailing pine, the cedar proud and tall, the vine-prop elm, the poplar never dry, the builder oak, sole king of forests all, the aspen, good for staves, the cypress, funeral. The laurel, mead of mighty conquerors, and poet sage, the fir that weepeth still, the willow, worn of forlorn paramours, the yew, obedient to the bender's will, the birch for shafts, the sallow for the mill, the myrrh sweet bleeding in the bitter wound, the warlike beech, the ash for nothing ill, the fruitful olive, in the platane round, the carver home, the maple seldom inward sound. Led with delight, they thus beguile the way, until the blustering storm is overblown, when weening to return, whence they did stray, they cannot find that path which first was shown, but wander to and fro in ways unknown, furthest from end then, when they nearest ween. That makes them doubt, their wits be not their own, so many paths, so many turnings seen, that which of them to take, in diverse doubt they been. At last resolving forward still to fare, till that some end they find or in or out, that path they take that beaten seemed most bare, and like to lead the labyrinth around, which when by tract they hunted had throughout, at length it brought them to a hollow cave, amid the thickest woods. The champion stout eftsoons dismounted from his courser brave, and to the dwarf awhile his needless spur he gave. Be well aware, quoth then that lady mild, lest sudden mischief ye too rash provoke. The danger hid, the place unknown and wild, breeds dreadful doubts. Oft fire is without smoke, and peril without show. Therefore your stroke, Sir Knight, withhold, till further trial made. Ah, lady, said he, shame were to revoke the forward footing for an hidden shade. Virtue gives herself light, though through darkness for to wade. Yea, but, quoth she, the peril of this place I better wot with than you. Though now too late to wish you back return with foul disgrace, yet wisdom warns, whilst foot is in the gate, to stay the step, ere forced to retreat. This is the wandering wood, this error's den, a monster vile, whom God and man doth hate. Therefore I rede beware. Fly, fly, quoth then the fearful dwarf, this is no place for living men. But full of fire and greedy hardiment, the youthful knight could not for aught be stayed, but forth into the darksome hole he went, and looked in. His glistering armor made a little glooming light, much like a shade, by which he saw the ugly monster plain, half like a serpent horribly displayed, but the other half did woman's shape retain. most loathsome, filthy, foul, and full of vile disdain. And as she lay upon the dirty ground, her huge long tail her den all overspread, yet was in knots, and many bouts unwound, pointed with mortal sting. Of her there bred 1,000 young ones, which she daily fed, sucking upon her poisonous dugs, each one of sundry shapes, yet all ill-favoured. Soon as that uncouth light upon them shone, into her mouth they crept, and sudden all were gone. Their dam upstart, out of her den afraid, and rushed forth, hurling her hideous tail about her cursed head, whose folds displayed were stretched now forth at length without entrail. She looked about, and seeing one in mail, armed to point, sought back to turn again, for light she hated as the deadly bale. Ah, wont in desert darkness to remain, where plain none might her see, nor she see any plain. Which when the valiant elf perceived, he leapt, as lion fierce upon the flying prey, and with his truncheon blade her boldly kept from turning back, and forced her to stay. Therewith in rage she loudly 'gan to bray, and turning fierce, her speckled tail advanced. Her speckled tail advanced, threatening her angry sting, him to dismay, who not aghast his mighty hand enhanced. The stroke down from her head unto her shoulder glanced. Much daunted with that din, her sense was dazed, yet kindling rage, herself she gathered round, and all at once her beastly body raised, with doubled force up high above the ground, though wrapping up her wreathed stern around, leapt fierce upon his shield, and her huge train all suddenly about his body wound. That hand or foot to stir he strove in vain. God help the man so wrapped in error's endless train. His lady said, sad to see his sore constraint, cried out, Now, Sir Knight, show what ye be, add faith unto your force, and be not faint. Strangle her, or else she sure will strangle thee. That when he heard, in great perplexity, his gall did grate for grief and high disdain, and knitting all his force, got one hand free, wherewith he gripped her gorge with so great pain, that soon to lose her wicked bands did her constrain. Therewith she spewed out of her filthy maw a cloud of poison horrible and black, full of great lumps of flesh and gobbets raw, which stung so vividly that it forced him slack his grasping hold, and from her turn him back. Her vomit full of books and papers was, with loathly frogs and toads, which eyes did lack, and creeping sought way in the weedy grass. Her filthy parbrake all the place deviled has, as when old Father Nilus 'gins to swell with timely pride above the Egyptian vale, his fatty waves do fertile slime outwell, and overflow each plain and lowly dale. But when his later spring 'gins to avail, huge heaps of mud he leaves, wherein there breed 10,000 kinds of creatures, partly male and partly female of his fruitful seed. Such ugly monstrous shapes elsewhere may no man read. The same so sore annoyed has the knight, that well nigh choked with the deadly stink, his forces fail, can no longer fight, whose courage, when the fiend perceived to shrink, she poured forth out of her hellish sink. Her fruitful cursed spawn of serpents small, deformed monsters foul and black as ink, which swarming all about his legs did crawl, and him encumbered sore, but could not hurt at all. As gentle shepherd in sweet Yuletide, When ruddy Phoebus 'gins to welk in west, high on a hill his flocks to veven wide, marks which do bite their hasty supper best, a cloud of cumbrous gnats do him molest, all striving to infix their feeble stings, that from their annoyance he nowhere can rest, but with his clownish hands their tender wings he brusheth oft, and oft doth mar their murmurings. Thus ill bested, and fearful more of shame than of the certain peril he stood in, half furious unto his foe he came, resolved in mind all suddenly to win, or soon to lose, before he once would lin. And struck at her with more than manly force, that from her body full of filthy sin he raft her hateful head without remorse. A stream of coal-black blood gushed from her course. Her scattered brood, soon as their parent dear they saw so rudely falling to the ground, groaning full deadly, all with troublous fear, gathered themselves about her body round, weening their wonted entrance to have found at her wide mouth, but being there withstood, they flocked all about her bleeding wound, and sucked up their dying mother's blood, making her death their life, and eke her hurt their good.